and his special goose-feathered pillows. There were also some bottles of excellent claret and brandy, which, despite the jostling they had received, were considerably more palatable than anything that could be purchased at the local inns. It was unfortunate that when his Grace had stopped at the Grouse and Thistle at midday, the second travelling coach had fallen behind. This was doubtless because Egmont, the Duke's first coachman, had insisted on taking all the best posting horses for himself, which meant that only very inferior horseflesh had been left for the second coach. "I tell his Grace afore we starts," the third coachman said bitterly, "that us couldn't rely on obtaining decent animals in an earthen barbaric country like Scotland, but would his nibs listen? No." It was a statement the other servants had heard 100 times since they had set out from Warminster. The fact that the Duke himself had journeyed to Scotland in his yacht before joining his coaches at Berwick-on-Tweed had done nothing to mollify the coachman's resentment. Inferior animals though the horses might be, they certainly seemed impervious to the roughness of the roads and the sharpness of the winds, which would undoubtedly have disturbed and perhaps incapacitated horses from the south that were not used to such weather. As he finished his wine, the Duke rose from the table he had been sitting at, and, crossing the room, picked up the fur-lined cloak he always travelled in. He was holding it in his hands as the door opened again, and a mob-capped maid, who he thought must be the daughter of the landlord, bobbed him a curtsy. "I've a request to make of your Grace," she said in a broad Scots accent. "What is it?" the Duke asked, putting on his cloak with some difficulty in the absence of his valet. "There be an elderly lady, your Grace, who begs you'll be kind enough to allow her to travel with you to the next posting inn. She's had an accident with her coach, and there be no way for her to reach there without the help of your Grace." The Duke paused in the process of buttoning his cloak. He had a rooted objection to travelling in a coach with anyone, let alone a stranger. He liked reading while he was travelling, or simply contemplating quietly in silence the many projects on which he was engaged on his many estates. The mere idea of having to make conversation, or to have someone chattering to him on the long miles that he must journey before he reached the posting inn, filled him with dismay. "Surely," he said tentatively, "there must be some other way that this lady can reach her destination." "Nay, your Grace," the maid answered. "The stagecoach only comes through here once a week, and we'll not see it again till after the Sabbath." The Duke longed to allege that there was no room for a passenger in his coach, but he knew that the well-sprung, recently built vehicle had evoked interest and admiration wherever it had appeared. Doubtless the elderly lady in question had already inspected its interior before asking him if he would give her a lift. It was therefore with a sigh of exasperation, which he could not repress, that he replied, "Very well. Will you tell the lady I am pleased to offer her a seat in my carriage, but that I am departing immediately?" "I'll tell the lady, your Grace," the maid said, and curtsying, sped from the parlour. The Duke was about to follow her when the landlord appeared with his bill. This was something the Duke had forgotten. Whenever he travelled without a courier, his valet invariably settled all the accounts. The Duke himself was never bothered with bills, or the necessity for carrying money. Fortunately, he had a few gold sovereigns in his waistcoat pocket, and he placed one on the salver that the landlord handed him, waving aside the suggestion that there should be any change. He had obviously overpaid, for the landlord was profuse in his gratitude, bowing and scraping in an excess of goodwill as he escorted the Duke to his carriage, and expressed many regrets that he had not been previously advised of his Grace's visit, so that better fare could have been provided. The Duke closed his ears in a manner that he had found most convenient when he did not wish to listen, yet by smiling pleasantly at the man when he finally reached the door of the carriage, he left the landlord with the conviction that he had been extremely pleased with his reception. A blustery wind blowing round the side of the inn almost swept the Duke's hat from his head. Holding it firmly in place, he stepped hastily into the carriage. Already seated in the far corner of the coach was the figure of a woman wearing a dark travelling cap, the hood